undisclosed location somewhere in the northern hemisphere, waiting out the alien apocalypse. He is armed with a machete and a microphone. This is the Mysterious Outpost.
Welcome to Mysterious Outpost Radio. This is Mike Blocker, your host for the evening. Tonight on the show, I got Brad Olson. I have been familiar with his work for a while. I've listened to some of his interviews on other programs, including Coast to Coast, and a little bit about Brad. He is the author of 9 books, including 2 in his esoteric series, Modern Esoteric and Future Esoteric, award-winning author, public speaker, radio show host of the Esoteric Circle, book publisher, and event producer. His keynote presentations and interviews have enlightened audiences at Contact in the Desert, Awareness Life Expo, the 5D events, and dozens of radio shows, including Coast to Coast, Fade to Black, and Ground Zero, which he recently did a show with Clyde Lewis on Ground Zero. Very awesome. I'll get the link to that also in the description below. But anyways, he is the founder and co-producer of How Weird Street Fair in the Soma neighborhood of his home base in San Francisco. Brad was featured on the front page of San Francisco Bay Guardian in September 2014. The Chicago native's esoteric writing continues to reach a wide audience while he continues breaking ground in alternative journalism, public speaking, illustration, and photography. All his websites, cccpublishing.com, esotericseries.com, stompers.com, howweird.org, and peacetour.org. Man, I'm telling you, you got a lot of things going on, Brad. How you doing, man?
Hey, Michael, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on Mysterious Outpost.
Yeah, and it seems like you've been going pretty strong. I've been seeing you, you're on Ancient Aliens, of course, right?
Yeah, I've been on a few of those episodes.
Yeah, because I remember seeing you, I forgot what episodes were they?
A couple in season 6. One I was talking about auditive levitation at the non-Madal site, and that was probably my longest clip. Another one on sacred mountains, and then I did a bunch for season 9, but I don't really watch TV. I'm not sure what was used or not, but I just do it, and it gets out there, and then people like you call me, and we do more.
Well, it does help, especially Ancient Aliens. It has really reached a broad audience, especially to people that were really unfamiliar with this type of work, this type of research, and it has opened the eyes of many. And I'm pretty familiar with a lot of researchers out there in this kind of field, but I came across your work a couple years ago, and I remember through Ancient Aliens, because I've always, when I see new authors or people that I'm not real familiar with, like especially on Ancient Aliens and other things, I'll just write a list. I'll keep a list. I got a big notebook in my office, and I try to eventually get to them. But yeah, man. So what led you down this rabbit hole of searching for mysterious answers in the ancient world? And because you discuss many things, you research many things. You're not just into ancient mysteries, but you delve deep into the rabbit hole with many other topics as well. What led you down this path of trying to seek answers and truth?
Yeah, I guess you could call me a big picture guy, because I do cover quite a few subjects, and I got into the esoteric subjects after doing several books. Most of my books are actually travel guides to sacred places and how to travel around the world, and other books that I did way back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And then so around mid-2000s, the internet started disrupting travel publishing quite a bit. You may have noticed at your local bookstore or Barnes & Noble, the travel aisle used to be like several shelves deep and long, and now it's usually shrunk to just a half a section. So the travel industry started to suffer because people can just research their own trips these days, and they don't really need to drop down $25 on a guide. So I went through a bunch of soul searching, and I'm thinking, well, the places that really resonated with me when I was traveling around the world, and I did a 3-year trip around the world, it's basis of my website, stompers.com, if you want to see that trip, and my first book, How Other People Can Do It on a Low Budget. Mm-hmm. And that book's still in print and still gets me emails now and again from somebody who said, I read your book, now I travel around the world. So I have a world perspective, and then a lot of these places that just stuck with me that I didn't have enough pages to devote in the Sacred Places book, somewhere like the Great Pyramid or the Giza Plateau. I thought that there's so many mysteries in the world, so many unanswered questions, and then you throw the aliens in the middle of this stuff and you get all the answers, like Bill Cooper says. And a lot of ancient sites have paranormal sightings around them, from Bigfoot at Mount Shasta to UFOs flying over certain sites frequently, and other manifestations that occur, other paranormal activity. And I think there's something more to this. So that's how the esoteric series started. And then, of course, it expanded into many, many other subjects. And I cast the wide umbrella by saying that it's all the subject matter that's been withheld from humanity. So that's why it's already a 2-book series, with Modern Esoteric as book 1 and Future Esoteric, which concerns itself largely with the ET UFO issue. And I'm now working on the 3rd book in the series called Beyond Esoteric, The Ultimate Journey. And these are all the subjects that could not have been imagined by a 19th century occult esotericist. All these things that are happening in this modern age. So it's very much a 21st century take on this theme. And since I don't repeat any of my subjects, coming up with new material, it's taken me a bit longer than the first 2, but I will get it out here.
What's your favorite subject to research?
Well, certainly things that are travel related, because I've had the opportunity of, say, going to Egypt, for example, and even climbing to the top of the Great Pyramid one night, which is very much illegal, but pulled it off. And then just having the living knowledge of visiting many of these places. But
didn't you go into the King Chamber too, Brad?
Oh yeah. Laid down in the before they had the video camera and the microphone that says you can't do that. Get out of there.
How the hell was that? Did you get like a weird vibe? Because I've heard a lot of people say that is very, just like this show, mysterious. You get this weird, strange feeling in there.
You absolutely do, and it's an initiation chamber, and it's designed that way. And if you were to spend a long period of time in there, like Napoleon, when he conquered Egypt, he said, I'm going to spend a night in the pyramid. And he slept in the Great Pyramid. When he came out, he was totally white-faced and just shocked and really didn't even want to talk about his experience. I mean, it's really intense. So these things need to be understood and taken a bit lightly. It's not the kind of thing that you can go in there as a tourist and take pictures, and it's all cool and this and that. But as far as using it in the initiation realm, and then so this is what really propelled me into these esoteric subjects, is that going back to the mystery schools and then the secret societies of more of this modern age, and all the hidden wisdom and secrets out there in the world, and what's being done to us in this modern age. I find very important information, not only to know on a personal basis, but important to get out there for other people to learn and understand.
And one thing that I've noticed over just the years of my own personal journey and research is that you can't leave anything unchecked. You got to pretty much cover it all or tap into everything, because if you won't, it's just like a jigsaw puzzle. One topic or one subject will, if you research in depth with that subject, that will give you an enormous jigsaw puzzle. And then you research other things, I don't know, conspiracies or whatever it is, UFOs, the paranormal. And they eventually, a lot of things do interconnect like a spider web. And it kind of does create a bigger, more vast picture of an understanding.
That's absolutely right. And you put that very well. There is a huge degree of interconnectedness between what's been put in our food, to who owns the media corporations, to how they're changing us through social conditioning, including what the educational system says, to what the government tells us to think. So many ways we are being manipulated. And it does trace back to this cabal group, whatever you want to call them, the Illuminati, the secret government, the deep state. I mean, there's levels to it and there's different layers, but it all traces back to these uber wealthy people who may not even be completely human, which makes it even weirder, when you consider the Paracas cone heads, and some of them have some of those effects to their cranium, as well as the Rh negative blood factor, it does appear that there is this ruling class. There might not be many of them, but I'll tell you, they control the assets and they control the narrative. And that's what it's all about, Michael. It's all about controlling the narrative. So when we start to challenge that and start bringing in some other subjects they don't want us to talk about, and people start getting the feeling like, hey, this is something really important that I need to be paying attention to. It's like the magician's trick, and they can't pull the wool over our eyes anymore. So it's starting to break down, and this new narrative, what I call the alternative narrative, people are really starting to understand it. And what happens when an esoteric subject becomes known by the mass majority of people? The word actually changes to exoteric. It's no longer hidden and protected by a select few. It's known to the vast majority. So that's what I'm hoping to do with the esoteric series, is just really explode this information out to as many people who are receptive to know and understand this subject matter.
And since I was already going to kind of save this for towards the end of the conversation, but I'll go ahead and spit it out on you. But
Do it.
with because we're eventually getting into, but we're talking about the controlling of information and knowledge, the past couple of minutes. So, but we will get it. We're about to get into the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx, and Africa gold mines. But with this clandestine control of Egypt, there is definitely a conspiracy going on, Brad, of controlling information and knowledge when it comes to ancient artifacts and the megalithic wonders across the world. But what is the purpose, and for what agenda is our true ancient past being kept from the world?
And it all gets unraveled right there in Egypt, or I should say what's below Egypt or within the Great Pyramid. And this was the subject that Clyde Lewis and I had on Ground Zero Friday night. This new cavity detected above the Grand Gallery in the Great Pyramid, first discovery in over 200 years of a new chamber. But really what's going on below it, and that is the mind-blowing stuff. That is going to change history as we know it and our view of ourselves on this planet and our relationship to the cosmos above inexorably, no matter what. So much so that we might have to redate the year zero to this big disclosure, which I believe, and I'm starting to feel, is very close and right around the corner. So what I said on a panel at Contacting the Desert is, think of this as the pre-disclosure time. Mm-hmm. The people who are getting into these subjects are very much revolutionaries, that we're grokking this material way before everybody else did, but trying to help them understand. And this is the graduate degree, almost like from kindergarten to a PhD. Intensive course learning this stuff and getting up to speed with how vastly much information has been withheld from us. And when you get it, how are you going to deal with it?
Mm-hmm. And you're exactly right. And you want to hear one of my, I guess it could be somebody else's theory also, Brad, but what I think is possibly down there somewhere, and maybe somehow we just can't catch it with, I don't know, the surface. What's it called? The surface
scanning radar.
Yeah, the scanning radar. Yeah. But maybe possibly some type of mothership down there, or some ancient mothership, and maybe that's what the pyramid. Because back then it is speculated that the capstone was made of gold, and it was actually covered in some other type of. It wasn't exactly how it looks today. And maybe it was really just a charging mechanism, some type of, or something to charge or to, whatever it is. I think it has some kind of connection to whatever is beneath the surface. And I think it has, I don't know, lack of better terms, mothership, UFO, whatever it is down there from the ancient past.
Oh, you bet. And Egyptologists let it slip about 6-7 years ago that there was a giant craft in a cavity, in a chamber. They have no idea how it got there. There's no logical explanation for how it is sitting there intact. Maybe they brought it in piece by piece, but maybe it's also interdimensional and it can come and go. But look, I was there in 1993. March of 93 is when I climbed the pyramid. That very same month, that is when Rudolf Gattenbrink was sending his robot up the air shaft of the Queen's Chamber. And there was a small room, not really a room, but just a cavity found to be there behind a door that they've cracked open, but nothing like this latest revelation. It was also the same time they were using sonar to scan the Giza plateau and finding that it's like Swiss cheese. There's chambers and passageways and giant rooms. And J.J. Hurtak, who did the Keys of Enoch book, he got down there at the water level, and there was a guide who took him on a kayak. Very privileged to be able to get this, have this opportunity. And he said, Hurtak said, he was going along in the kayak. They got lights on their heads. They're paddling along. They come into a chamber that he said could fit a Gothic cathedral from Europe inside. Massive chambers down there, and at the water level. And water played an integral part into the design of the Great Pyramid as well. I mean, we could do this whole show on Giza and the plateau, and I've been utterly fascinated with everything to do with Egypt, and including this Egypt Gate controversy of keeping this knowledge away from the people. And this year at Contacting the Desert, Andrew Collins was one of the speakers, and got to know him pretty well. And he did the famous video series of getting into the underground Giza chamber passageways via the Temple of the Birds, which is to the west of the Great Pyramids, but not too far away. I think you can still watch those videos on YouTube. Utterly fascinating. I mean, they just go on and on and on to the point where you're getting worried that you might get lost if you don't leave a good trail behind you. So that is total cover up as to what's going on down there. But once again, you put the aliens in the middle of this stuff and you get all the answers, Michael. And what's really going down is it is and has been an ET outpost for mainly the Draco ETs. And it's called Comga-il 2 II. And it's this base that's very, very old. People have a recollection in past lives of interacting with some of these reptilians when they could come above ground back then, but these days they pretty much stay down there. That's the core secret. That's why they can't let anybody know about it or let people down there. But like J.J. Hurtak, maybe the dam's starting to break and select few are allowed down there. And I'm absolutely sure that Zahi Hawass knows well about it for sure. And he's leading the whole Egypt disinformation. And
he's covering this shit up big time.
Oh, yeah, big time.
And so what if that one of the things that they're covering up, Brad, is, of course, I'm sure, I know you're familiar with the inner earth, the hollow earth. Yep. What if, because let's say that aliens are here, and I believe it's a very good possibility. Maybe they're multidimensional, interdimensional, we just can't see them, I'm not sure, or sometimes we do see them, of course, in the skies. But what if, the reason why the vast majority of us do not see them is because they're underground, and one of the entrances is actually there in Egypt.
Well, yeah. It's a legacy base. It's what I could tell you about a half a dozen legacy bases, and that means multi-thousand-year-old underground ET bases, one of which not too far away from me at Mount Shasta, and that is a city called Telos. There's another one in New Mexico at Dulce. Mm-hmm. That's a legacy base. And my friend Anthony Sanchez, in his book UFO Highway, describes how the very first mounted police in this country found the entranceway to Dulce on the Archuleta Mesa on the Colorado side. And in that entry, you could get scout craft in and out. But were all these dead bodies of Indians from hundreds of years ago. Whenever they had some kind of scuffle with the ETs, they'd come to the cave and just get slaughtered. Mm-hmm. So these mounted police knew about it from the 19th century. And according to the source that Anthony Sanchez talks about in UFO Highway, that they used that entrance to go in there, and it was many layers and levels before they actually got anywhere, but eventually got into the base. And then this ties into the whole Greada Treaty, which is this unlawful treaty that was gotten us into with the Greys, who are basically representing the Draco, this malevolent ET force, which has been on the planet, mostly underground, for thousands of years. And they have manipulated humankind to keep us stupid, to keep us not knowing their agenda or even that they exist. And another great Bill Cooper quote is, "It was then learned, and it is now known, that the ETs have been manipulating society through witchcraft, magic, the occult, and religion."
Do you
Just
think
let that sink in, because that's how
Yeah.
they've been doing it for thousands of years.
And it's crazy because the rabbit hole just keeps getting deeper and deeper, Brad. And do you think that they are working with there's many names for them, the Illuminati, the elite, the deep state? Do you think that they're secretly working with maybe a select few across the world?
Absolutely, and have been since the pharaonic times. Just keep in mind that a pharaoh was basically a man who was a living entity. Now, you could probably argue that like Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti and their daughters had the cone heads. They were like the Paracas Karus skulls. I do a talk. One of my talks is the forbidden archaeology of giants in our prehistory, and along with very human-like skeletons that have been discovered all around the world, even here in North America, the mound builders and the mound sites. And so I was learning about this stuff when I was doing Sacred Places North America. And as I said earlier, I just had so much material, I just had to expand on it in these esoteric guides. But I have this universal knowledge base of all these subjects that have been hidden from us, because so many of them also tie into these locations. But in the case of what you're asking about the elite, yes. And so how it's done is they're shadowed. And that means they'll basically draw into a pact with these malevolent ETs. And that's what making a deal with the devil is all about. This is my premise at the conclusion of Future Esoteric. And that they live underground, and hell is underground. The devil, the demons, could be the Greys, Satan, could be the Dracos, Lucifer as well, the devil. And what they do is, since we are so ignorant and unknowing about what happens beyond our very dense third dimensional reality, they can shapeshift into the fourth dimension. That's how you've heard reports of Greys just walking through walls, unless it's like a magnetically protected to keep them in there. They can phase in and out of our reality. And this is just such a mind-blowing concept to us if we have no knowledge of it. But if you study that there are other dimensions, and then above the fourth dimension, by the way, the fourth dimension is the realm of the archons. That's where you have these demons that can be evoked like through medieval magic, King Solomon's magic from the medieval times, things like that, tapped into it. And you can get them to help you. And it's called shadowing. So you make a deal with the devil, so to speak, and you want the fame and fortune, like a lot of these rock stars that put a hand over their eyes. Okay, you're going to get that. But what did you pay to get that? Because now you're working for them. But so what they can do is shadow you, and they can take out your enemies. They can get you that big promotion. They can make you rich. They can make you famous. But how far is that going to get you karmically with your journey personally? That's the limitation of it. You can get everything you desire here on earth, but is it worth it to sell your soul out? And I say emphatically, no. You can still have a great life and not sell your soul out and things like that. I mean, I'm not a religious person either, Michael. I should just clarify this. I grew up an atheist, but as I pieced all this together, I very much now know that we are spiritual entities having this human experience. And that to deny the knowledge of fourth dimensional entities and above is just shutting yourself out from a great body of information that we should all start learning about, so we know about this and how to protect ourselves from these predatory species.
You only live once, Brad. Why don't you just join the dark side?
No way. Screw that.
But anyways, you were talking about shapeshifters, and so first off, have you seen the movie the 1980s cult classic They Live?
Oh, I love it.
Yes, me too. I have a poster that I actually don't have hung up yet. But anyways, do you think it's possible that a lot of, I mentioned a while ago that the ETs that are here, maybe they're under the ground, under the surface, the inner earth, the hollow earth, or that base that you're talking about beneath the pyramids. But what if the ones that are above ground? What if they are actually human beings, or that look like human beings, just like in the movie They Live? And that's the reason why once in a blue moon, we get these crazy sightings of these shapeshifters across the world.
Absolutely. And as well as glimpses of the fourth dimension. And we can sometimes see them materializing. And there's even photographs, Carillion photographs, that you can take a person's aura photo with, and you can capture them, just like the archons are here among us. We just can't see them, but once in a while you can catch a little glimpse. And like the movie They Live, that people can shapeshift, and if you wear the glasses you can see them perfectly clear. And then what does that do? It totally changes your entire view of reality, doesn't it?
It sure does.
When that happens, boy, guess what? You're thinking of things in a whole new way. And you're starting to look at the world and everybody in it in a completely different way, because now you have that knowledge. And that's really the metaphor for learning these esoteric subjects as well.
And when you have that knowledge, Brad, and then, of course, we go through them stages, especially friends, close friends or family. We kind of want to wake up. We want to open their eyes, open their mind, to expand their consciousness to the bullshit reality that we actually live in, that everything is not exactly how modern academia portrays it in a lot of the bullshit books. But, just like in the movie They Live, Roddy Piper, he was trying to get his friend, I forgot his name, the black guy, to wake up. Put the glasses on, man. Right. Put the glasses on. They're fighting and just throwing each other around. And that's a great metaphor for how it really is, Brad. Like, people, they will show cognitive dissonance. They will spit in your face. They will name call. They will pretty much do what they did in that movie, fight and just, go at it. But whenever they actually put the glasses on, a whole different paradigm, awakens within them. Yeah,
absolutely. And boy, have I taken a lot of arrows for espousing some of these views, as you can imagine. But hey, it's to wake people up. And look, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You can present this material as thoughtfully and with all the references. And if somebody is just saying, no effing way am I going to believe in aliens, then they won't. And there's nothing much more you can say. And you might as well just move on to the next person who may be more receptive.
So let's go skip forward to the pyramids in Egypt again. Recently, of course, many websites have covered articles on the mysterious void discovered in Egypt's Great Pyramid. So what exactly is this? You touched on it just a little bit earlier, but what exactly is this mysterious void that they're talking about, this secret chamber? And also, do you think that Zahi Hawass, I believe that's his name, do you think they're trying to keep this, the real true meaning of whatever this is in the Great Pyramid, hidden from us?
Well, the funny thing with Zahi Hawass is right around the time this story broke last week, Robert Bouval, who I've met at Contact in the Desert, great Egyptologist, he said that in a recent interview, Hawass says, I have known about that chamber for 25 years. Well, why didn't you say anything, dude? It just shows what a cover artist he is for holding this information back. Yeah, it's a massive chamber. If you know the internal layout of the Great Pyramid, there's this grand gallery, and I've been in there. It is so spectacular. There's nothing like the inner chambers of the Great Pyramid and all the other pyramids. And I went down and visited about a a dozen or so when I was in Egypt around Giza Plateau, and then all the way down to Saqqara. And you can get in, and usually they just like one passageway to lower chamber, and that's it. But the Great Pyramid has all these different levels, air shafts that come out of the King's Chamber, 2 air shafts out of the Queen's Chamber. They don't even know where they go yet. One of them that Gattenbrink showed had a little door that they opened, and it was a very, very tiny chamber.
I don't think those were used for oxygen. You know, a lot of people say that, like, you know, it had to have been for something else, right?
Well, in the Queen's, it's still a great mystery, but they did burn some flares out of the King's, and they did find the connection on the outside. So in the King's, it was air chambers. But as I said, that was an initiation chamber. So it was meant for people to be in there for a period of time, and therefore you need oxygen to survive. But back to the new discovery. So this chamber basically parallels the cavity size of the Grand Gallery, which, by the way, you could put the fuselage of a commercial airliner in the Grand Gallery to give you a scale of how big that internal chamber is. And this one that's supposed to be above it is about the same size. So about the size of a fuselage of a commercial airliner is the space. So this is very significant news. And it is also showing that the internal function as well as the external function of the Great Pyramids are nothing to do with pharaoh burials at all. That's just a cover story to make something up. These were power generating plants. The Great Pyramid also had the function of being a pump, which, think about it, taking the water out of the Nile and fertilizing farmlands as far as you can imagine when Egypt was a vastly different place. And we know this because there are water markings on the side of the Sphinx suggesting that it once was a very verdant green area. Now, of course, it's just vast Sahara Desert. So Egypt has changed quite a bit since these monuments were built. And these monuments are also much, much older than the Egyptologists are giving them credit for, to the tune of 10,000 years or older. And this is known because of the direction of the Sphinx, that it once faced towards the constellation of Leo. And if you've read Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock, he makes a very exquisite case for the precession of the equinoxes. And therefore we can use archaeoastronomy to date these relics. And the date is about 12 to 14,000 years ago. And why is that significant? Because that is at the time when there was some great Earth cataclysms. That's when places like Yonaguni off of Okinawa in Japan, this great site that's only been discovered in the last 30 years, showing this carved rock on many different layers. And I have pictures of it in my book, Modern Esoteric, in a chapter called Lost Continents, and so many underwater ruins. So there was a cataclysm that took down a very high-tech civilization, most commonly known as Atlantis. The survivors of Atlantis regrouped in various places around the world, but the majority of them went to Egypt. And with the technology and the knowledge they still had, erected the Great Pyramids, because the other two also play into the Giza power plant function. And just the shape of a pyramid, you can create energy that comes out of the top. But you put a Great Pyramid with a couple companions around in the Fibonacci sequence, and you can tap into Earth energy to the point where when the Great Pyramid was functioning properly with perfectly sided, smooth as glass sidings made out of white quartzite crystal, it was also generating energy from the sun, just like giant solar rays would. And that energy, as well as Earth energy, could be condensed into the Great Pyramid. And this is, again, part of the initiation chamber, that there is a flowing energy that goes right up from the bottom of it all the way up through the top, and could have even used the Great Pyramids as a refueling power station. A few authors I know, such as Chris Dunn and Gary David, have written about this, and especially Chris Dunn. His book is called The Giza Power Plant. And in 400 and some pages, he makes a very strong point, as well as Joseph Farrell. He did one called The Giza Death Star. But again, both of them are pointing to the same thing, that pyramids collect and generate energy that can be used in various ways, as, say, a Death Star or a power plant.
So they were using the pyramid, or constructed the pyramid, pretty much to be a power plant to energize the spaceships.
Could refuel a spaceship. It didn't even need to land.
Do you think that was the main purpose, or did it have multiple purposes?
Well, I think it was a free energy creating device, which with free energy, like Tesla was trying to do with the Wardenclyffe Tower, perhaps they had a distribution method to get energy up and down the Nile. And we know about the Baghdad battery and the hieroglyph images. They're carrying like a big light bulb. And keep in mind, Michael, that in all the tombs in Egypt, and I've been to dozens of them all down in the Valley of the Kings and so forth, until modern people came with modern torches, there was no sign whatsoever of any smoke or soot. So whoever carved them out and then created those very intricate hieroglyphs and painted them, they weren't using fire and torch. They had some kind of lighting source in those chambers to do that.
So you mentioned Atlantis a while ago. So you think that Atlantis, or the Atlanteans, were descendants, or no, Egypt, the Egyptians were descendants from the Atlanteans?
Correct. Called the Osirian Empire. Was the first empire once they stabilized the planets. And that's another purpose of pyramids on all continents of this planet, is they found the fulcrum point, so to speak. And in the case of the Great Pyramids on the Giza Plateau, it is at the center of all land masses on the planet. If you look at longitude and latitude, it's the most amount of land that could be anchored by those pyramids. Then you have the Bosnian pyramids in Europe. You have Great Pyramids in Xi'an, China. There are step pyramids in Australia. You have Incan and pre-Incan pyramids in South America. And you have the giant earthen mounds here in North America, such as Monk's Mound in Cahokia, Illinois, where I'm originally from, the Chicago area, but I've been to Cahokia several times, especially when I was working on my Sacred Places North America book. And the pyramids were used, part of the reason, their purpose was also to anchor the earth energy and stop the continents from drifting and just keep them solid and set. And that's where we've been ever since that last time they moved.
What about Antarctica? Because I know
there are
that
pyramids down there too.
Yeah, and do you think that the Atlanteans were there, or did it, or the pyramids that were there have been there so long, it was part of the, I guess you can say, the Pangea, and it just drifted to where it is now?
Yeah, I think the pyramids are more in the 12,000 to the last 2,000 year frame. One of the latter pyramid groups was Teotihuacan in Mexico, just outside of Mexico City. And those are even under 2,000 years old. But the Mayan pyramids as well, maybe at that point they were building them for different reasons, but I would say the core ones were for this added purpose of stabilizing the continents to keep them from drifting. And then the Ice Age occurred and melted, and then we have the current shoreline that we see on our globes today.
So I want to skip forward just a little bit. Very fascinating discussion about the pyramids and
Sure.
and other mysteries, but let's skip forward just a little bit about about Africa. Are you a subscriber to the out of Africa theory?
Well, sort of. Not really so much as we've been taught in evolutionary school. And I do believe that evolution occurs. It does with animals, but humans did appear rather suddenly. That's why there is no missing link. You'll never find a missing link, because there is no missing link to humans. we basically appeared in this time frame of about 200, 300,000 years ago. Now, there were proto-humans for sure, such as Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal and Homo erectus and Australopithecus africanus and others who were basically this middle link, but there's nothing between them and us. You see, and that's where things get really interesting, because then we're going into Africa, and Michael Tellinger is a colleague of mine, and he was also speaker at Contact and Desert. We had many talks, and I use his information in my talk about the giants, and that is that you have these very ancient gold mines down in Africa, and all around them, all these ruins. And I have images of them in my book, Modern Esoteric, going all the way back and talking about these antediluvian civilizations and how the very earliest ones all surrounded these ancient gold mines. And it appears that's what we were designed for by this Anunnaki ET race, using some of the proto-humans and perhaps some of the humans who had come out of Atlantis. Now, this is when it starts to get really interesting, because this is what factors in the Rh negative blood. And my family happens to be of that. And there are 15% of Earth's population are Rh negative. And what that means is Rh stands for rhesus monkey. So 85% have a descent from these proto-humans. And that can be very much detected through Rh positive blood. But then where did the Rh negative come from? Because then that means had no lineage with the proto-humans. And those were the survivors of Atlantis, who were more pure Homo sapiens sapien than we are today, because we've had this mixturing going on. But basically, when humans were made into its current form, they were taking some of the survivors of Atlantis, they were taking the proto-humans, and they were building the human race from there. I would propose that the human race is several races, like a dozen different races, just in the same way that the African giraffe in April was just divided into 4 species of giraffe. Now, if you were to go to a zoo, you would not be able to tell any of those 4 apart, right? And just recently, they did the same thing with a new species of orangutan on Sumatra. Well, there's already the Sumatra orangutan, and now there's like this other little subspecies. They're calling it a different species altogether. Well, that's what humans are. Many different species, and yes, we can all mate, but a lot of other animals can mate, like horses and donkeys can have a mule. It might not be sterile, but it can be done. And so the same thing happened with humans over many, many generations.
So how do you think it happened, Brad? Is okay, with evolution, things do evolve, So let's say that the evolution, where we came from, swamp gas and puddles of mud, whatever. But let's say there's some kind of, I don't know, some kind of connection there with the natural evolution of Earth. Do you think that's where the gods came in, intervened, and they created that spark with the natural evolution here on Earth?
Right. So they were master geneticists, and if we'd been having this conversation 50 years ago, Michael, this would have seemed straight out of science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
But in that time, we've already had Dolly the sheep, which was a cloned sheep that's already lived and died, and now we're cloning humans. We have that technology. It is not much of a stretch to think that a species can be developed in a laboratory. Now, it's a species that still mates naturally, has love attraction that humans have, and just like the animals, an ability to perpetuate itself. However, there are ET species, such as the greys, who have lost that capacity and now are very much in dire need of our DNA, because all greys are born in a test tube. They cannot reproduce naturally anymore. That's why they're here and have been here for a long time, because they absolutely need our DNA to splice and create this what will be known as this emerging hybrid civilization, almost exclusively down underground, but there are pictures now emerging of some of them coming above ground, and they're extremely intelligent, telepathic, show all these superhuman abilities that we glamorize in superhero movies and show, but the hybrids have this capacity.
Exactly, Brad. And I swear, man, every once in a blue moon, I just going to the store, just whatever, going to the park, whatever it is. Every now and then, I'll see somebody. I'm like, this person has. This person.
They read your mind and said, "Oh shit, he sees me."
This person has to be some kind of freaking alien hybrid, because you know what I'm talking about. Like, you see certain people, and you're like, it's something with their eyes, with their. It's hard to. On top of, you just get a strange vibe, like something like this person isn't human. You ever get those strange vibes?
All the time. Yeah, not necessarily from someone who I think is a hybrid, but from people that I feel. And this is the thing about being a good person. That's why I would never sell out. All the material riches are just illusions, anyways. But being in service to others, and this is really what it comes down to with understanding exopolitics and all the ET races. It doesn't matter if they have slit in their eyes or scales on their skin or how tall they are or how freaky they look, or maybe they look exactly like humans. The only thing that matters is, are they service to self or service to others? And if they're service to self, then you might get that bad vibe, because there might be something that you have that they want. But if you're service to others, they won't intervene. And this is the Earth drama, and this is up to us Earthlings to figure this out. And it is, like the Star Trek series proposes, a prime directive.
Yeah.
And we have the right to determine our own future. That's why the service to other ETs don't just land on the White House lawn and say, "Take me to your dealer," or whatever they would say.
Drug dealer.
Leader, I meant. They can't do that, is the point. And it makes perfect sense if you understand this idea of the prime directive, which, by the way, the whole Star Trek series was in the late 1950s. Gene Roddenberry was sitting around the table with the Council on Nine, and they were communicating with humans in our future, 350 years in the future. And so many of the questions revolved around, what is life like on Earth? Now it's about 300 years in our future. And at that time, they had gotten over these hurdles. They have gotten rid of money. You know, there is no scene in Star Trek where you see anybody exchanging money. Mm-hmm. And I have a chapter in Future Esoteric about the end of money. This is a utopian concept, but this is who we have the potential to be, traveling through outer space as explorers, as benevolent explorers, not as conquerors, because we embraced the prime directive. We became service to other human beings on this planet. And when that happens, like the Burning Man festival out here on my side of the country, it's all a gift economy. There's nothing to spend the money on because you can't. Everybody gives everything away. And it triggers that part of the brain that's associated with feeling good. And drug addicts get that feeling when they get that high. You can get that by being generous. Mm-hmm. You can get that by being charitable. And the three tenets of Buddhism that apply to all of us in our everyday life is always seek wisdom, practice charity, and be compassionate. Charity, compassion, and wisdom. That's all you need to know. And that's how you become a service to other human being.
But, you know, a lot of people, you know, the thing is, how do we move forward and how do we evolve as a species? Because it seems like no matter what, there's always going to be somebody that's going to, let's say that we just do away with government, that we do away with the people that are keeping these mysteries, keeping the true nature of Egypt and the pyramids and other many mysteries around the world, keeping them hidden from us. Let's say we did away with those people. I feel like there is still going to be somebody to replace their shoes, because it's like there's the ego part of the brain, the reptilian part of the brain. There's always people out there that are willing to step up and, think that they have all the answers and all the truth. And eventually we'll just wind up in the same shithole.
Well,
I'm not a pessimist person by no means. I'm very optimistic though.
But you have to understand, Michael, this is the period of the great unveiling. All of this stuff is becoming known. How you deal with that information is up to you. That's your personal journey. Mm-hmm. All you and I can do is just put it out there and let people use their critical thinking skills, match up data points, and use your intuition. We have powers innate in all of us. We just haven't used them. It's like muscles. If you don't use them, they atrophy. Mm-hmm. Things like our pineal gland, we have no idea how to open that up and activate it. And it's been so calcified by fluoride and in use that it's like we're just stunted from the beginning. But if we can just get over these speed bumps, and that's really all it is, we could have the great golden age for humanity. And I think we could even have it within our lifetimes. And that is the most spectacular thing you could ever live a lifetime to see. That's why it's so important to focus on good and only good, and helping each other and giving homeless change. It doesn't matter. Be a good person. Agree. And good things will start to happen to you. And it'll start unlocking some of these innate, what I call superhuman abilities in all of us. And it'll just become easier because we could very well make that great leap into the 5D in our lifetimes. Just go right over the 4D, go right over that whole Archon network and demons and weird stuff and where the Dracos dwell. Just jump right over them. But
I think the ego is holding us back. I think man's ego is holding us back.
Absolutely it is. For sure. And what is ego? It's just self-aggrandizing yourself, surrounding yourself with a nice car and big money, and so other people look at you and think, wow, that guy's got it going on. But in the grand scheme of things, that's not what it's all about. And we're all going to know this when we die, but I say, why don't you know it before you die?
And we actually have a few more minutes. That's actually a perfect way to end the conversation, but I have to ask you about with the pineal gland. It's just a crazy, interesting idea I thought about the other day. And, of course, in Michael Tellinger's work, his book, I think it's his first book, the slave species, the slave race of the gods, the slave species of the gods, I think is what it was. Do you think that we are created as a slave race? And secondly, does the pineal gland have something to do with that? Do you think the pineal gland is like a restraint holding us back from spiritual enlightenment and natural evolution of consciousness?
Actually, I think it's the other way around, and I have a chapter in Modern Esoteric all about the pineal gland, a whole chapter.
Because I've heard both sides of the story, Brad. I've heard, of course, I've always been a believer that the pineal gland is a way to tap into our higher self and to expand our consciousness. And that's what I still believe. But I heard, forgot it was some video or something the other day that kind of sparked my curiosity, that they were talking about the pineal gland being a way to actually hold us back. What's your thoughts?
I think of the opposite. I think we have been held back from understanding and utilizing the pineal gland. And not sure if you know this, but fluoride in the water basically congregates around the pineal gland. And there are photos before and after, people who have drank fluoride water their whole lives versus people who never have. And they show the pineal gland, and one of them has like a white calcification around it. And that shuts it down.
And also, I think the Nazis, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think the Nazis actually fed it to the slaves or fed it to their people or something like that because they is to keep them under control.
Right, that's right. And so small doses of it will do that. A large dose will kill you. If you squeeze a whole tube of fluoride toothpaste and swallow it, you'll have to go to poison control because you might die. Mm-hmm. So it will kill you, but in small doses, it makes you docile. And that's what they've been going after. That, and I would say also to control us from turning onto these innate abilities. And some of them have to do with utilizing our pineal gland. But if it's shut down, we can't do these things.
And do you really think they give a damn about our teeth? You know what I'm saying?
Certainly not.
It's a much bigger picture there. They don't give a damn about our teeth, about our keeping our teeth healthy.
Right, and you can actually screw your mouth up if you drink too much fluoride with it. They use it in rat poison. That should be enough to tell you how dangerous this stuff is. I live here in San Francisco. We get our water out of the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir, which is right next to Yosemite National Park. We get the purest water, one of the best water municipalities in the country, and they put fluoride in it. They ruin it. And if you put it under microscope, like the Japanese Dr. Emoto did, you can see what happens to the water at a molecular level when you pollute it. It becomes all discombobulated and chaotic looking. But pure water that's clustered molecularly, it's like looking at a beautiful snowflake. It's sacred geometry on the molecular level. And so we have to understand that we're under assault by air, land, and sea. By air as the chemtrails, by land as the GMO in our food and crops, and by water, the fluoride. So there is a wholesale poisoning of Americans, and in some degree, the people of the earth. So we have to understand what's going on here before we can ever institute anything like a change. But I think that change is happening, and things are happening very quickly right now, with Saudi Arabia going through it, and it may be in this country we could see some arrests of the Podestas, Hillary Clinton, John McCain. I think it's happening at a very quickened pace, and the old order is about to collapse spectacularly before our eyes. And when that happens, then it's going to be the rush of so many of these subjects that people are going to be exposed to.
And for the final question, I meant to ask this a while ago, and you can kind of, just give your take and just kind of your closing statements as well. What is, because I believe we're in this grand awakening also, but the elite, the cabal, also the bad ETs or whatever, there's some type of agenda going on, of course. We've been talking about it, and everybody feels it, everybody knows it. Some type of agenda or end game involved. What do you think that end game is, Brad?
Well, on the good side, the end game is love, and this will propel us into a 5D reality. And it's funny you bring that up, Endgame, because I have 2 chapters in the end of Future Esoteric. One is Endgame Love, where we need to go to create the Golden Age. The other is Endgame Enslavement. And quite literally, that's what could be happening if we don't make our move right now and assert our independence. Because look, we're by far the majority. There's not many of these people who are pulling the puppet strings up there. And once we pull the curtain back on the Wizard of Oz, there he is, some little old man playing with his financial instruments like George Soros and throwing billions into these protests and social upheaval. All we got to do is see what the magician's trick is, and it's game over for them. And we get them out of the way, and we move on. Because that is the flow of the river, is to make these changes and for humans to ascend, to finally have the opportunity to know what is really going on, and then have that opportunity to make a great leap forward and enter this golden age when free energy technology gets released. We could put an end to money, or at least clear out debt. And maybe this is 10, 20 years from now, but certainly releasing free energy technology could be as soon as in a couple months or a year. And that would absolutely revolutionize the planet. We could turn the deserts back into gardens and jungles and rehabilitate the planet, both by land, creating new trees and forest zones where there once was desert, to cleaning up the ocean and getting rid of all the garbage gyre patches. So there's so much good we can do if we just have the opportunity to use this technology and use it wisely. That is where compassion, charity, and wisdom always come into play.
Absolutely, and well said, Brad. How can people support your research, and where can people find your books? Is it on your website, Amazon? Where do you like people to support your research at?
Oh, always go to my website first, cccpublishing.com, and I also publish other authors. You can read about them through the Google Books app, browsing them like in a bookstore. And if you order them through the website, then my books go out and I have the opportunity to sign copies for people. But my books are distributed through IPG, so they're available in bookstores nationwide and even around the world. But certainly, if someone cared to support the cause, to get them through CCC Publishing is the best way. And if you want to learn more about me, bradolson.com, and my YouTube channel is Esoteric Series. And as you mentioned in the setup, I now have a radio show every Wednesday on Revolution Radio. It's 3 to 5 out here, and then I do 2 hours on late night in the Midlands, 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific time, called the Esoteric Circle. And I'm reading chapters from Modern Esoteric right now.
Sweet.
To create an audio book, but then I break it down and we have a discussion about some of the salient points in those chapters after.
Well, thank you very much, Brad, for your time this evening. I'm going to have you come back on in the somewhat near future because, man, I got to pick your brain some more on some other topics because, man, you are knowledgeable on many things, and that's exactly my cup of tea because there's no hold barred when it comes to these topics. I like to research it all because I feel like I have a better understanding, and I will definitely have you on in somewhat the near future to discuss other things, Brad.
Oh, it'd be my pleasure, Michael. You're a great host. You ask really important questions, and I can't believe the hour went by so quick.
Exactly. And stay right there, Brad. And that is Brad Olson. And I'm going to give the links in the description below. Check out everything. I'll give the links to his website, his books, and just support his research. We have to support researchers like this that are trying to seek answers, especially when it comes to ancient mysteries, the esoteric, and just pretty much anything that is mysterious in nature. And we got to keep these researchers going, and everything will be in the description below. And I got more guests coming up soon. Just go to the website, which I'm still working on. It's a work in progress, the mysterious Outpost radio.com. And also subscribe to the channel if you're swinging by for the first time. That's how you can support my work. Just simply subscribe. But anyways, until next time, you keep truthing and have a good one.